Member of the Netherlands Parliament, Kati Piri. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation.
Thank you, dear Kati. So my first question would be about the Dutch Parliament's action on about the Demirtaş and Kavala. So the Dutch Parliament has made the Demirtaş and Kavala condition for the modernization of the customs union. However, Turkey generally does not comply with the ECtHR, European Court of Human Rights rules and ruling as well. So what kind of consequences does non-compliance with the ECtHR rulings create in Turkey, where human rights violations are continuously increasing every day?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to say that Turkey, as a state itself, decided to join the Council of Europe. And by joining the Council of Europe, of course, Turkey is also obliged to respect all the verdicts of the European Court of Human Rights. So that's the basis. The state Turkey has decided to join, and then you have obligations. And this is, of course, something where all Turkish citizens can apply to the court. And if there is a verdict, then normally the country, the same applies to the Netherlands and to Dutch citizens. You normally have to comply, of course, with the rulings of the court. That's how any rule of law or international law is normally working. And we here have the case of two very well-known cases inside Turkey. Of course, the arrest of Selahattin Demirtaş at the moment that he was still also the leader of one of the biggest opposition parties in Turkey, the HDP. And we have Osman Kavala, of course, also a well-known case. And in both these instances, after all the legal procedures had been finalized inside the Turkish system, the court cases came to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. There, the Turkish government could defend its own position. Of course, the lawyers of Mr. Kavala and Mr. Demirtaş could make their plea to the court. And the court has come up with a very straightforward verdict. And the verdict is that these people, based on these allegations by the Turkish state, are innocent and should be released immediately. Now, this did not happen yesterday. These court decisions are already there for quite some time. By the highest court, and that means that if Turkey is not respecting these decisions, it first of all has a problem in the Council of Europe. But as far as my party and the Dutch Parliament are concerned, it also has a problem when it comes to its relations to the European Union. And that's why we have said, I'm very much in favor, of helping Turkey also when it comes to its economy, and modernizing the customs union. I'm not against it, but for Dutch companies to invest in Turkey, there must be respect for the rule of law. There must be respect for basic human rights. Otherwise, it's also not safe to do investments in a country. And that's why we said to the Dutch government, it needs to be a precondition that the verdicts of the European Court of Human Rights are being implemented and respected by Turkey before we can agree to modernizing the customs union.
Thank you, dear Kati. Secondly, you were the rapporteur for Turkey. And in Turkey, the human rights violations, especially in prisons, are increasing day by day, as we can see on these Amnesty International reports as well, and some reports of the ECtHR as well as EU Council. So how do you evaluate the current state of human rights in Turkey?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't seen much progress in the last years. Of course, I don't follow it just as closely as I did in the years that I was a Turkey rapporteur. But when it comes to the freedom of the media, the freedom of free press, one of the basic cornerstones of a functioning democracy, we don't see any improvement there. When it comes to harassing the democratic opposition, I mean, the HDP who we spoke about even had to, participate under a different name because there were legal cases going on against it. We see what they're doing with legal cases, for instance, against the mayor of Istanbul, who, of course, also, as I have this opportunity, want to congratulate with his re-election from here. We also see what was happening in Van when the Kurdish mayor was elected. How it needed the pressure of the people to respect the outcome of the vote. And I'm very happy that they succeeded, but it was not a certainty that they would actually succeed in that. And of course, for instance, the Council of Europe is also very much looking at the circumstances to the human rights situation in prisons, where they can also do inspections. And also there, we know that a lot of people who I would call political prisoners, because they're not in there for having committed a crime, which in my country would have been seen as a crime, are locked up for many years and not always being able to speak with their lawyers or have the visits of the family. So I would say that the human rights situation and the rule of law situation in Turkey is still a very big concern.
Thank you, Kati. Another issue is about the Netherlands' position as well. So once I find you would like to ask that one as well. So the visit made by the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan after the decision change the stance of the Netherlands, do you think?
Well, for now, you never know, but you always need to work on democracy and the rule of law. But in the Dutch political system, the final word is always to the parliament. So the parliament is the institute which has the most power. It has more power than a government. So if the parliament says, and we have adopted the resolution, that you need to have this precondition before talking about the modernization of the of the customs union with Turkey, the government cannot suddenly decide not to respect that, or cannot, after a good meeting with the foreign minister of Turkey, decide, well, whatever they said in parliament, I have changed my mind. That's not possible. I mean, in case that would happen, that means we can send the government home tomorrow. So we have a very clear, by majority, adopted position of the Dutch parliament. And the government, the caretaker government that is there, has to respect that. And it doesn't matter how many conversations there are with Turkish officials, that position of the Dutch parliament will not change.
The Netherlands did not allow Turkey to enter the EU customs union expansion plan. However, states such as Germany and France have almost given the Turkish state a blank check and turned a blind eye to violations. So what does Europe want to do? What is the Europe's position?
Look, I have always been, also in my years in the European Parliament as Turkey rapporteur, been very, very sometimes very angry about how EU governments deal with Turkey. Because it's not always the citizens who live in Turkey who are the biggest interest, but very much national interest. So very much national interest when it comes to migration, or when it comes to the geopolitical situation where we're in with the war between, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, for instance. But I believe for a country that is a member of the Council of Europe, that at least on paper, it still says that its ambition is to one day become a member of the European Union, you must have different standards. If a government says that it one day wants to become a member of the European Union, you cannot ignore talking about the rule of law and talking about human rights. And the Dutch government was no different than the governments that you mentioned. They also wanted to sign, as you say, a blank check on giving all kinds of privileges when it comes to economy, when it comes to visa, without any precondition on human rights. Now, again, let me be clear. I've always been in favor of visa liberalization with Turkey. I'm in favor of upgrading the customs union with Turkey. But it also means that then the Turkish government must do more than it does now to respecting human rights. And this is where I criticize my government. And this is where a majority in parliament says that without any conditions on human rights, you cannot just make these steps. So the difference is not between the governments, but I think a difference here is that the Dutch parliament decided not to give this green card to the Dutch government and to the Dutch prime minister before going to Brussels to have these conversations on Turkey-EU relations.
Thank you, Katie. Let's get back to the situation about the Dutch government. So the Dutch Prime Minister's name is being mentioned for the NATO presidency lately. So the NATO has a harsh and tough attitude towards the Kurds. As we can see, they can turn blind eye on Turkey's war crimes in the Middle East, especially northern and east Syria as well. But can this attitude can be changed with the change of the NATO's president? Do you think?
Well, we will have a change of the president for sure, because the current Secretary General said that he's not going to continue. As citizens of the Netherlands, although he's not from my party, I think it would be good with the experience that he has if Mark Rutte could become the Secretary General. Although my party is in opposition to his current cabinet as well. Having said that, I don't think, perhaps the Kurds feel it that way, but I don't think there's a certain NATO policy towards the Kurdish people. I think there are many countries in NATO, and some very dominant countries in NATO, which, for instance, have turned a blind eye or has supported military actions of Turkey. I think we can all agree that Turkey is one of the problem children in the NATO alliance. On the one hand, an important ally because of its geographical position, because of having, a big army. On the other hand, of course, problematic because of its human rights records, problematic because of some of the military incursions we have seen where the Kurdish people have suffered a lot from. And there's always the threat that this will continue to happen. And of course, also when it comes, for instance, to the war in Ukraine, Turkey has kind of, definitely not taken the same position, for instance, as the United States. So to answer your question, I think it very much depends on the member states. And I don't think, to be honest, that the Secretary General of NATO as such will have a big impact on those policies. Depends on the dominant countries within NATO, and of course the United States being the first one.
Thank you again. So just to close the issue about our main topic, the NATO's position as well as the Turkey's position in the international arena. Basically, it's very important that how should the Europe respond to Turkey, which does not comply with the ECHR ruling and deepens human rights violations with its policies. So, what needs to be done to what kind of steps should be taken against Turkey to comply with the ECHR as well as the European Council? And there is many EU institutions that they have decisions about Turkey, but Turkey is the only country that doesn't comply with it, and nobody seems like that can do anything about it. There is an example about Russia and Azerbaijan as well lately, as you know, but why this doesn't apply to Turkey? What needs to be done to make Turkey to comply with these decisions?
Well, look, I mean, it's always relative, right? Because, for instance, the Dutch Parliament cannot ask the Dutch Prime Minister to open the cell door of Osman Kavala and Selahattin Demirtaş. So you always need tough diplomacy to play a part. But it starts with mentioning it. It starts with putting it on top of your agenda in every single meeting that you are having with Turkish officials. And that is why, look at Osman and look at Selahattin. They're in jail now for more or less 8 years. I saw Selahattin Demirtaş just celebrated his 51st birthday in prison. All the court cases at the international court are clear. His family, his 2 daughters, have not seen him for a long time. He hasn't been able to visit home. We saw a couple of months ago when his father died. You're taking away innocent lives and locking them up far away from where they are living. And so I think, first of all, we cannot forget about these people. And behind the case of Selahattin Demirtaş and Osman Kavala, there are so many other people who we are not mentioning here. Also former mayors in cities in the south of Turkey, in the Kurdish areas, who are in prison without having had a fair trial. Like I said, who are there because of political reasons, not for having committed a crime, at least not a crime that in my country would be punishable. And that's also why the European court cases are so important. And I think it's up to European member states, if you take your own values seriously, if you are, for instance, saying to Russia, you have to respect international law. If not, we're doing sanctions. That means also to those countries who you are trading with, who you are in the same Council of Europe with, you have to stand by those same rules. So keep it on top of the agenda, do the diplomatic pressure, and don't give rewards without Turkey making steps in complying with these court cases.
Thank you. Lastly, would like to ask you something that lately happened. So just before our interview, I tried to give you some information about it. The pressure on the Kurdish media and Kurdish organizations, basically the pressures and police raids on Kurdish press institutions in Europe have intensified lately. So finally, Media Haber TV in Belgium and Ster TV was raided last night. So, however, the Benelux states, as you know, are very assertive about the implementing the democracy and human rights. So, are the Benelux states changing their attitude, do you think, about democracy and freedom of speech? How would you evaluate the pressure on the Kurdish press in Turkey occurring in Europe as well?
Well, thank you for the question, but it's almost impossible to answer for me. Not knowing any of the court cases, not knowing exactly what is going on. But let me stress what I do know, is that it's so important to have respect for the free press. Also, when it comes, also in the Netherlands, only in this country, in this city where I am right now, in The Hague, we have 30,000 Kurdish people. And it's so important to also have the free media for them. As we know from many parts of Kurdistan, you cannot have the media coverage that you can do, for instance, from Belgium or here from the Netherlands. So, of course, it's, in a country, in Holland, it should not be possible, and I very much hope it's not possible, and I hope it's the same for Belgium, that you in any way you can put political pressure on courts. That would be a very, very bad signal if that is happening. As you know, in the Netherlands, the biggest party with the last election was a far-right radical party, and I'm very concerned about what could happen with pressure on the rule of law system, also in my country, in the months ahead, in case they would be able to form a government. But the freedom of media, I think we all have to fight for it. This is important something, especially in the rule of law. And I'm proud, for instance, that in the Netherlands, we are always finding radio stations, TV stations, who can record very important media shows here for also for viewers in countries where that free media cannot take place. So I very much hope that also in all the years ahead, that very strong basis of free media, and that also means free Kurdish media, can remain in place.
Dear Kati Piri, member of the Netherlands Parliament, thanks for joining us and thank you for your valuable comments today.
Spas, thank you very much.
Thank you.